Welcome to Molotov Now, a podcast about taking action.
In Molotov Now, we analyze and discuss news articles and stories of resistance from around the globe and connect them to our struggles here at home in Aberdeen, Washington.
In the spirit of building solidarity between the rural and the urban, we hope to inspire direct action in the face of oppression and to light a fire to find each other in the darkness.
This is Sprout.
And this is Charyan, and we are the hosts of Molotov Now. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the podcast.
In our last episode, we talked to you about Terry Emmert and his nefarious plans for our little town. We dissected what opportunity zones are and why they are being used by the wealthy to buy up huge amounts of low-income communities around the country. Here in Aberdeen, that looks like one playboy millionaire from Oregon securing a virtual monopoly on the real estate market. So that episode covered where we are now in Aberdeen.
In this episode, we will dive into the archives of the Harbor Rat Report and the local paper, The Daily World, to look at how we got here. We will examine the path that Aberdeen took over the last half-decade to get to where it is today. But first, we would like to take time to apologize for the hiccups in our last episode caused by our neighborhood alley cats and saboteurs. They are feral and
they mean well, at least, I think.
They do. They really do. But they just have too much energy or something, and there are always just so many of them. We are tired of having to dig litter out of our keyboards and... Anyway, we're sorry for all that. It will not happen again. We have secured the studio and hired some security to keep out intruders while we record.
We have a few articles from the Daily World to get through today about the origins of the plans to evict the longtime homeless camp known as the River Camp from the banks of the Chehalis River. The multiple interactions the city had with the camp, a couple lawsuits, and all of the yanking around the city did with the homeless post-eviction that has brought us to where we are today. We've got music from Daze and the window-smashing job creators this episode, and please stay tuned for our monthly Radical News Roundup after this brief message from our sponsor.
By the way, you can pick up a butt plug or a dildo at Target nowadays.
That's right, Marjorie. Target has all your dildo and butt plug needs. Whether you're looking to follow the white rabbit, or you just want to exercise your Second Amendment. Where we go one, we go all. And where we go number two, we go ball. Steve. Come into Target and together, let's make your asshole gape again.
Cram in and shove in butt plugs.
I'm Marjorie Green and I approve this ad.
You can support Sub Media by buying some gear, making a one-time donation, or by signing up to be a monthly sustainer on their website, sub.media.
Welcome back to Molotov Now. It's time for a quick recap of the news this month.
In local news, as we have moved out of wildfire season and into house fire season here in the county, fires have been breaking out all over Grays Harbor. One fire claimed the home of an elderly woman who was put up for a week by the Red Cross. Unfortunately, after the week was up, she was looking at being evicted onto the streets with no assistance coming from any of the large, well-funded institutions in town. A neighbor eventually made contact with Chehalis River Mutual Aid Network and was able to discuss the issue with us long enough to where we could advocate on her behalf to CCAP, who agreed to pay for her room for another week and set her up with services intake. All it took was a phone call from us about why they would be kicking this lady out on the so-called Thanksgiving weekend. Another fire broke out at our local homeless camp. The affected campers were left with nothing, and of course the Salvation Army and Red Cross have provided zero help. Chehalis River Mutual Aid was out there immediately providing resources, a helping hand, and are working to secure the affected campers places to stay while their belongings are replaced. If you would like to contribute to their fire support fund, you can find all the donation links at linktree/CR Mutual Aid Net. The local religious group Chaplains on the Harbor seems to have gotten approval to move forward with the county contract for an emergency cold weather shelter here in Aberdeen, with a post on their Facebook saying, "As the year comes to an end and Christmas is upon us, we want to take the opportunity to thank all of our supporters who have enabled Chaplains on the Harbor to do the work we do. After much delay, our team is busy gearing up with so many community partners for an Aberdeen emergency cold weather shelter. This week we have identified a site, toured inside and out, had verbal approval by municipalities, have witnessed changing hearts and attitudes, waiting official approval, met with landlord and his construction crew to make a few necessary changes, reaching out to community resources for additional staffing and resources that will be needed. An answer to prayer, a Christmas miracle. Thanks be to God for community members that take care about taking care of our most vulnerable neighbors." No shelter has been opened as of the writing of this, but this demonstrates that the public pressure put on local officials has finally broken through into some forward action. Despite this objectively good news, this will mean another 25-bed shelter, when in reality hundreds remain in need of shelter throughout the city. So activists and radicals should be attentive to those left outside still, and do everything we can to push for a permanent camp location and shelter for all. Not by appealing to politicians' whims, but by building a grassroots coalition that can exert its own power in local affairs.
263 children woke up on the 25th of December to a Christmas that would not have been possible without the efforts of Caesar Hart, Vice President of the Out and Proud Coalition, and their Operation Santa Claus event.
In the face of growing anti-queer sentiment in the country and calls from Jim Walsh to protest the event, Operation Santa Claus was a huge success. The annual event raised a little over $2,000 in one evening. The Out and Proud Grace Harbor Coalition donated an extra $500, and their online fundraiser raised another $575. So far, over $3,000 has been raised to purchase gifts for underserved kids for Christmas. This was the most successful event they have ever had in their 8 years running. Children, parents, and other patrons packed the event, leaving little but standing room as people enjoyed the drag performances, concessions, auctions, and even a balloon artist. The kids in attendance had a wonderful time with their balloon animals, dancing and singing along to the performances. In a statement posted to the Out and Proud Grace Harbor Coalition's Facebook page, organizers said, "We gratefully thank this amazing Grace Harbor community for not letting hate win and for showing up for LGBTQIA+ individuals and the amazing drag performers." But not everything was happy holidays and worry-free celebration this year. In the wake of online hysteria and Facebook groups by local conservatives and reactionaries, many parents were left worrying for the safety of their children from the threat of attack by far-right extremists as outcry and public threats jumped from the pages of conservative Facebook to pushback by local officials and state representatives such as Jim Walsh and other organizations demanding a shutdown of the event. Organizers received a slew of screenshots and messages from people who claimed to be, as one message stated from a resident in Raymond, that they were, quote, sympathetic to domestic terrorists that target your community. These threats and statements are made openly with little pushback or repercussion, not even a month after the Club Q shooting, where after the shooter targeted a queer bar, injuring 25 and murdering 5 others, was only stopped not by police, but by the patrons of the bar subduing the shooter, prompting the slogan in queer circles, "Cops don't keep us safe, we keep us safe." Luckily, Operation Santa Claus went off without incident. Potential protesters deterred by the fog and rain of the winter weather. The same could not be said of other drag events happening in the same day. A drag show in Renton that faced major pushback led to city officials and the business who was hosting the event having their window shot out by unknown shooters days before. John Brown Gun Club was invited to run security for the event, where a team of at least 8 guards ran overwatch and made sure the drag event resumed safely. A combination that has been trending since an event in Texas that had been the target of a threat and harassment was shielded from a mob of reactionary protesters by armed anti-fascists from the John Brown Gun Club on the 28th of August 2022. As the number of drag shows being targeted by extremists continues to grow, so has the need for community defense and the need for queer people to arm and defend themselves.
We have seen a massive spike in overdoses, including fatalities, since the cold weather has arrived this winter. And while public officials would like to simply call these deaths overdoses and wash their hands of them, the truth is much more complex. When you live on the streets, you often self-medicate with drugs in order to sleep, in order to warm up. For some, it's the only way to make it through a cold, wet night in a tent. So the rise that coincides with the cold weather can largely be attributed to exposure, as these additional deaths are the result of the additional strain on physical limits that people living outside in the winter go through. These are literally our friends dying every month, and the city has this blood on its hands for denying shelter for so many, for so long.
In Dayton, Washington, Katie Hussey and Jessica Wallingford were the target of illegal police harassment by Officer Riley Conahan on November 29th outside of a local grocery store, where the off-duty police officer pulled a gun on the couple, refusing to show any form of identification. Katie was quoted as saying,
"The voice you will be hearing in this segment is not that of Katie, but that of a comrade reading on her behalf."
I took my girlfriend Jessica and her little sister Allison to the local grocery store. I waited in my grandpa's truck I was borrowing for the night. Mind you, he is a retired state patrolman, while they went inside. When I was waiting, I noticed a man come to an abrupt stop and turned into the store parking lot all crazy-like. But I live in Dayton, Washington, so crazy things are normal. I didn't think much of it. A couple minutes later, I noticed the same guy coming out of the double doors, looking all around and in a hurry. He went to his truck and went back inside. A few minutes later, Jessica is getting into the truck. The same man had a gun pointed right at Jessica. She literally got into the truck, closed the door, and her window was rolled down already, and the weapon was right there pointed at us. He yelled over and over again, telling her to get out of the vehicle, and she really quietly was telling me, "We need to go." I was in shock and had no idea what was going on. This man in cowboy boots, jeans, and a hoodie, pointing a gun at us, claiming to be a cop, really didn't seem real. The whole incident lasted about 5 minutes from what the dispatch call's timestamp shows. I finally spoke up and yelled, asking what was going on. He said to turn the vehicle off, and I asked after that at least 20 times to see his badge. He said he will show me if I turned off the vehicle. Even though right before he said that, he already checked his hoodie pocket for it, and you could see his hand go entirely through the pocket out the other side. I made the decision to leave and get out of this dangerous situation. I told him I was going to put the car in reverse and leave. I went and dropped Jess at her parents', and I went home and called 911 myself. I explained how there was a man claiming to be one of them, and he had a weapon pointed right at us and wouldn't show a badge when asked. They asked if I wanted to speak with a deputy and sent one out since I was angry at what just happened. The deputy brought statement forms for me and told me to turn them into him when he gets on shift around 6 the following day to make sure the forms actually get filed.
During that time that Katie and Jessica had fled, Officer Conahan had made a call to dispatch requesting the license plate of the pickup truck that she had been driving that day that she had borrowed from her grandfather. This resulted in another call from dispatch to one Officer Rivera, where after laughing and acknowledging that Officer Conahan was attempting to make an illegal off-duty arrest, proceeded to assist the officer in what has been an ongoing campaign to harass this couple. Rivera having the license plate number proves just how much their home had been stalked because Katie only had the truck less than 24 hours and they wrote it down when it was parked outside their home. Here are the audio clips from the dispatch calls, including the call Katie has made reporting the incident with Officer Conahan.
Columbia County Dispatch, how can I help you?
Hey, it's 906.
Hey.
Hey, I think I got Jessica Wallingford here at the Dayton Mercantile.
Oh, you said Jessica Wallingford?
Yep. Send Jeff this way.
He's on a mental health at the moment.
Who else you got?
Suicidal teen.
No, who else you got on shift right now?
Oh, I got Matt.
Yep, send him this way.
Okay, she got a warrant?
Yes, she has like 7.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. I'll let her know.
And I'll call you if anything changes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Dispatch.
Hey, they ran from me.
Oh, she ran from you?
Yeah, her vehicle. Caitlin knew it, and she drove away. Going to the residence, hang on. Fucking hell. Jessica ran. I told her she was under arrest, and she ran away. Damn it.
Okay.
Fucking kidding me. So Caitlin is abiding fucking fugitive now. Fucking hell.
What was she driving?
She's driving a vehicle. It's a pickup truck. Charles 00. Call Rivera. He has the plate number. I don't have it on me.
Okay. Okay.
Damn it. That's why I needed my badge to recover, but no one gave me one. And now I had a... Oh. Whatever. So she's driving a pickup... Caitlin's driving a silver pickup truck. Fuck. Yeah, call Caesar. He has the plate. He can provide it to you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep. Bye.
Hello.
Hey, sorry to bug you.
Hello?
Riley asked me to call you. He ran into Wallingford in the grocery store and tried to arrest her, and she ran from him. He was wanting me to get the plate number from you of her vehicle, if you had it.
Wait. Say that one more time?
Oh, Riley was in Dayton Mercantile, and Jessica Wallingford was in there, and I guess he tried to make an arrest, and she took off running from him. And so he was asking me if I could I asked him what vehicle she was in, and he told me to call you and get the plate number. He said you probably had that information.
Ooh. Okay, then I could get you that information. Give me a few minutes. I got to go to my car and turn it on and all that. So, yeah, give me a few minutes. It's okay. It's okay. He's trying to make an arrest off duty?
I guess so. He called me.
Oh, I can't turn it off.
Hold on 1 second. One second. Beginning mileage 0.0. Yeah, he told me to send somebody that way, and 905 was on scene with a suicidal teen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I'm like, well, I can get Matt heading that way. So I told Matt, and right after I told Matt, he calls back and said that she ran from him after he tried to make an arrest, or I don't know.
All right, well, just give me a few minutes, Tiff. I will turn on my vehicle, and I'll send you that plate through CAD, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, bye.
Thanks. Columbia County Dispatch, this is Kelly.
Hi there. I was just at IGA, and there was a guy with casual clothes who pulled a gun on us and would not identify himself. But he said he was an officer.
Okay.
I mean, I find that highly ridiculous to have a gun pointed at me and no badge being shown when I'm asked multiple times for his badge. You don't just do that and not show a badge. I'm sincerely pissed the fuck off.
Okay. And how long ago did this happen?
10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago.
And what is your name?
Katie Hussey.
And what's a good callback number for you?
I don't have a callback number. Allison, what's your number?
Okay. And you said you were at IGA when this happened?
Yeah, and he came out into the car and pointed a gun telling us to get out of the vehicle. Well, every time I asked for a badge, he persisted on just getting out of the vehicle. He reached for something to get, like he was going to get a badge out, and he didn't. And so I drove away. But for somebody not to pull a gun and not show me a badge when I asked probably 20 times, it sincerely, I mean, that's just not right.
Okay. Okay, and what is your address? And are you currently there?
Yep.
Okay. Would you like to speak with an officer?
Actually, I would, yes.
Okay, I'll get someone heading that way to come speak with you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The morning after she made this call, though, Officer Conahan showed up at their house after seeing her car home. That was around 4:30 p.m. The same off-duty officer who had just pointed a weapon at Katie and Jessica was now at their door demanding their arrest. Katie shut the door and demanded to speak with his supervisor and that she didn't want to talk to him, considering he was just aiming a weapon at her less than 24 hours ago without provocation or identification. After surrendering, she was charged with obstructing a law enforcement officer, rendering criminal assistance, and resisting arrest. While at trial for this incident, Katie was found not guilty for the first two charges and found guilty for resisting arrest, which makes no legal sense if the courts had found her innocent of the first two charges given the absurdity of the incident. Her attorney has filed a couple motions to get her charges dropped or put up for a retrial. We won't know what the decision of that is until January. The couple has also been forced in a dual case of no contact orders by the court. This is a load of garbage. This couple was a victim of the state, and even though the no contact order was lifted on behalf of Katie when the initial trial ended, they are still under the penalty of a no contact order on Jessica's side. And for what? So they didn't have the same story? There was only one thing that happened that night, and that's the truth. If you were to look at all the articles in the public statement and testimonies at trial, every single one is different. Their stories haven't changed a bit. Katie had this to say about the ordeal.
All in all, we didn't deserve what happened to us. Why did they do this to us? We aren't the violent criminals they make us out to be. They could have just said it was a rookie mistake and moved on, but they completely destroyed us. I've been to jail 2 or 3 times now because of this. They had a no contact order on us for an entire year, and actually mine was just dropped at the end of the trial. But Jessica still has one in Superior Court on me. They drive by our house, maybe 10 to 20 times a night, and almost practically stop outside my place. It's why I have cameras outside. Cops were my biggest advocate growing up, and my grandfather is a retired state patrolman. I had nothing against officers, but now I'm traumatized, and the sight of a deputy sends me into a panic. I want my life back. We want our life back. Jessica and I have lost everything because of these officers. I lost my job, Jess lost her home, and my rental assistance was terminated thanks to this county. And I don't know what to do. I'm losing yet another place since I can't afford it, and my depression has completely taken over my brain. There's no winning, it feels like. I wish I knew why they hate us and want to ruin us so badly.
We will be conducting a follow-up interview with Katie after her trial in January, where she will not only be able to speak for herself, but will expand upon the story and her most recent developments from trial. To support Katie in this hard time, please send any donations to Venmo at Katie Hussey, that's KatyHussey, or Cash App, #Katie Hussey. Thank you. On Christmas Day, thousands of people in Graham, Washington woke up to no power after 4 power substations were vandalized at different locations, as reported by Cairo 7. After over 14,000 people in Pierce County celebrated Christmas in the dark, Tacoma Public Utilities restored power to their substations on Monday afternoon. The Sheriff's Department says 4 utility substations were vandalized early Sunday morning. The Pierce County Sheriff's Department says just before 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, they received a call of a burglary to the Tacoma Public Utilities substation off 46th Avenue in Graham. When the deputies got there, there was nobody on the scene, but they saw that the fence area had been broken into. In this one, the suspects cut one of the locks on the fenced area, made their way inside, and caused damage to the substation, said Sergeant Darren Moss, Jr., spokesperson with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. Shortly after the Sheriff's Department was notified, the substation off 224th Street was also vandalized. Deputies called Puget Sound Energy, which also provides power in the area, and they confirmed that their substation off 144th Street was also hit. All 3 happened in the middle of the night on Christmas Day, causing power outages. Nothing was stolen in those facilities, so it's a good possibility they are related, said Moss. As of now, they don't have any suspect leads. On Sunday night, a 4th power station was attacked in Pierce County. When crews arrived at the scene at about 7:30 p.m., it was on fire. The substation is located on the Caposin Highway near Graham, where it left more than 500 people in the area without power. The cause was reported as vandalism. Sergeant Moss says deputies will be monitoring all substations. This, to some of our listeners, may sound like a simple act of asinine behavior, a drunk driver, a disgruntled worker, teenage angst, but to those paying attention to the actions of white nationalists in the recent weeks, might have more cause to be alarmed by this blatantly coordinated attack on our power grid.
In other news, a state of emergency was put into effect in Moore County, North Carolina, after 2 power substations were vandalized with gunfire, leaving tens of thousands of homes in darkness. No one knows who launched the attack on the substations, which left over 40,000 people in darkness, but the attack in North Carolina is being probed as an intentional and criminal act, authorities said. Moore County Sheriff Ronnie Fields stated during a press conference that he called the attack targeted and said law enforcement would provide security for the substations and business overnight. "We faced something last night here in Moore County that we were never faced before," Fields said, "but I promise you we will get through this." He said rumors were circulating online that the attack was connected to protests over a drag show at a local theater scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. However, investigators have not found any evidence that the two were related. No group has stepped up to acknowledge or accept that they're the ones who have done it, adding that the FBI was working with state investigators to locate whoever is responsible. Fields said someone opened fire on the substation, the same thing with the other one, though no motive for the crime was determined yet. But as pointed out in a tweet by Gwen Snyder, though the FBI and major media outlets may not be willing to call the Moore County power grid attack, that may have been the cause of death of one person in Pinehurst, the act of domestic terror it so clearly is. You know who else is only too happy to call it terror and attempt to incite copycat violence? Nazis on Telegram. We are about to read some of these Telegram posts. Content warning for extreme transphobia and violent threats.
If you would like to skip this content, please skip forward 1 minute.
One Telegram post read as follows. Happening confirmed. North Carolina grid shot and 40,000 without power after attack. Vital infrastructure sabotage is back on the menu. The white man has finally had enough. No motive. No suspect. Gun store completely cleared out. Nightfall. With no power and curfew placed, martial law in 4 hours. It's actually seriously fucking happening. 2 more weeks is over. Another post read. Last night's magnificent sabotage attack on Moore County's electrical grid marks a beautiful escalation and sends a terrifyingly clear message to the slurs and all other degenerates in their little community. Pushing your sick and perverted sexual agenda onto our people, and especially our children, has consequences. Those consequences will vary, but they will be severe. You might get more countied. You might get club queued. Fuck around and find out, slurs. Hail holy terror.
On Tuesday, December 13th, there was a raid in the Atlanta forest where 5 were arrested after police brutalized them with tear gas and pepper balls. Forest defenders swiftly called for a noise demonstration at the DeKalb County Jail in solidarity with the 5 people arrested during the raid. By 8 p.m., protesters began to amass near the facility. Sheriffs on foot lined the perimeter of the jail as a choir of 25 voices, a dozen drums, 2 guitars, a cello, and various handheld noisemakers approached. Jail administrators peered down from the office windows as protesters tossed smoke bombs in the road and chanted, 1312, we are all here for you, and no forest, no peace. According to this report on the arrests, on December 13th, the task force raided the training center site. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation issued a press release publicizing the arrest of 5 protesters on charges of domestic terrorism, among other alleged offenses. But the agency has been unable to provide any incident reports or other documents showing exactly what the arrestees are accused of doing. A 6th person was arrested on a charge of violating Georgia's hands-free driving law, which bans the use or touching of a cell phone while driving, but for a different underlying reason. We had an individual who was out attempting to film officers, the Atlanta assistant police chief said. We were able to get him with the hands-free law as he drove by filming our officers, so we were able to lock him up. A press release from the Atlanta Press Collective stated, on December 17th, 175 people gathered in Brownwood Park in East Atlanta to declare their support for the 6 activists recently charged with domestic terrorism and to demonstrate their continued opposition to Cop City, a proposed 300-acre, $90 million police training facility in Atlanta's largest urban forest. These charges resulted from an interagency raid on tree sitters, which included the Atlanta Police Department, DeKalb County Police, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, and the Department of Homeland Security. The training facility, though widely opposed by the public, local neighbors, and environmentalists, has been approved by the city, although construction has been delayed for over a year by protesters occupying the forest.
A small Kansas county became a site of a significant pipeline failure last week as the Keystone Pipeline leaked an estimated 14,000 barrels of crude oil into a creek, the largest spill in its history. Now officials are scrambling to clean up the mess made by the system, which stretches more than 2,600 miles from Canada to the U.S. Keystone Pipeline has had nearly 24 accidents since it went into service in 2010. According to a report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, a history similar to other oil pipelines, there are dozens of significant oil pipeline incidents every year in the U.S., according to the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, costing more than $3 billion and leading to the deaths of 6 people since 2002. More than 719,000 barrels of crude oil have been lost in that time, with each barrel being about 42 gallons. From Reuters, TC Energy Corp., the owner of the pipeline, said on Friday, a U.S. regulator had approved a restart plan for an idled segment of its Keystone oil pipeline to Cushing, Oklahoma, and it looked to restore service after several days of testing and inspections. The 622,000 barrel per day pipeline was shut down on December 7th after it spilled 14,000 barrels of oil in rural Kansas, the biggest U.S. spill in 9 years. The pipeline from the Canadian province of Alberta to the U.S. Gulf Coast has since reopened, except for the segment that ruptured between Steel City, Nebraska, and an oil storage hub in Cushing, Oklahoma.
At the end of October, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey began dropping the first of thousands of shipping containers along a 10-mile stretch of national forest in open defiance of federal authorities. Ducey has cited increased border crossings and the trafficking of fentanyl as justification for the trash wall's construction, despite the fact that most drugs are brought in through established points of entry, not the desert. The Intercept wrote, Doug Ducey has transformed a remote section of rugged desert into what looks like a junkyard. Along the way, he has set the stage for an unprecedented legal showdown with the feds. In a lawsuit he filed 3 days before the installation began, Ducey admitted he had not received authorization for the project, but was proceeding anyway. The governor's actions create precisely the sort of states' rights and border security confrontation the Biden administration would be inclined to avoid less than 2 weeks from the midterms. The situation has left environmental advocates racing to stop the project, which cuts through a corridor designated as critical for the endangered jaguar. The environmentalists' options, however, are limited. As Unicorn Riot reported, since November 29th, a loose collection of locals, environmental activists, hippies, and migrant solidarity workers have been putting their bodies in the way of the machines. They have successfully delayed the work crews for a week and a half, who have been rushing to drop as many shipping containers into the wilderness as possible before Arizona Governor Doug Ducey leaves office in early January. What began as a tentative experiment in disruption escalated to a full-fledged encampment earlier this week. When workers switched to night shifts so they could work unimpeded, blockaders started camping on the site to keep watch. And now, a quick rundown of some headlines from It's Going Down. December 6th, counter-protesters defend Fort Lauderdale from anti-trans hate rally and Proud Boys. Montreal, tenants escalate against Cromwell renoviction. December 9th, workers in Dallas, Texas at Alamo Drafthouse stage walkout. December 12th, Greenspoint tenants confront abusive property management in Houston. December 16th, community defends LGBTQ+ event in Lakeland, Florida in the face of threats from neo-Nazis. December 17th, Wet'suwet'en solidarity action to block the port of Montreal. December 18th, Jacksonville, Florida, community pushes back against Proud Boys. December 19th, far-right drowned out by Brockville community in Ontario. And on December 21st, Proud Boys no-show as Aurora, Illinois community mobilizes in opposition. And community defense groups defend drag event from far-right in Kansas City. If you would like to read more about any of these articles, you can check them out at itsgoingdown.org.
This month saw more insanity at Twitter as Elon Musk took up the ban hammer and, with advice from far-right grifter Andy Ngo, began banning anarchist and anti-fascist accounts that previously raised the ire of the right, generally, and Ngo specifically. Andy Ngo having called out CrimethInc by name in his testimony to Congress in June of 2020. At the time of the suspension, It's Going Down had over 108,000 followers. IGD has been on Twitter since 2015 and has never been suspended. As a media collective, IGD curates a regularly updated website, a podcast in the top 1% of downloads featuring weekly dialogues with journalists, authors, and grassroots organizers, and a radio show that reaches tens of thousands across the West Coast on the Pacifica Radio Network. As a media outlet, IGD has been quoted and cited in Teen Vogue, the New York Times, and every media platform in between. IGD has been instrumental in reporting on grassroots movements and the growing threat of the alt-right and white nationalism. In response, IGD has drawn the ire of the far right, from Tucker Carlson on Fox News to the neo-Nazis who marched in Charlottesville. From CrimethInc. On November 24th, a white nationalist who speaks at conferences alongside Richard Spencer posted a tweet approving a wave of bans on Twitter. Elon Musk responded favorably to him, and far-right troll Andy Ngo answered Musk, specifically requesting that the @CrimethInc account be banned from Twitter. Within a couple hours, Musk had fulfilled Ngo's request. The @CrimethInc account on Twitter dates from May 2008. The account has never been suspended or received a warning throughout 14 years of Twitter administrations. Ngo is not putting any new material to Musk's attention, but reporting years-old screenshots. Other Twitter users were banned under similar circumstances today as well. Musk's rhetoric about making Twitter a venue for free speech was a lie. Musk bought Twitter in order to impose his agenda on what he saw as the most influential social media platform remaining outside of the control of people like himself. Like Donald Trump, Musk brazenly says the opposite of what he means, and his supporters interpret this as a show of strength. At the same time that he welcomes Donald Trump, white nationalists, and fascists who have been banned back to Twitter, Musk is purging those who stand in the way of their authoritarian aspirations. Make no mistake, the point of silencing our voices is to prepare the way for other kinds of violence. Today we speak to you from the other side of the Great Divide. Banned on Facebook, Instagram, and now Twitter, we nonetheless exist and organize. if you could still hear us, if you are reading these words, then there is life after social media. That goes for entire social movements as well as the individuals and publishers. Looking at this situation in a broader historical context, Twitter itself is like a canary in a coal mine. Elon Musk's acquisition of the platform confirms the end of social media as we've known it, at least for the purposes of positive social change. All the major platforms that played roles in the movements of the past decade have been brought under the direct control of reactionaries determined to make sure that they cannot be used to coordinate resistance. The question is, what comes next? Will reactionary billionaires determine what we can think, what we can do, and what we can dream? Or will we establish other channels via which to communicate, other forms of connection, other means of coordination? In response, we invite you to make the streets of your community speak out with a new poster about capitalists with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. If there's one medium that billionaires will never control, it's wheat pasting. To address the situation, we've dusted off a classic motif of ours and designed a new poster. We invite you to plaster the walls of your community with it, in a strictly legal way, of course. In addition, if you prefer to paste up posters the old-fashioned DIY way, rather than just buying wallpaper paste or spray adhesive, we have made a zine version of our field guide to weed pasting. Please print these out and distribute them to anyone who might be interested in communicating on a platform that isn't run by a pro-fascist billionaire. You can read the contents of the zine, check out the poster, and read more about these articles by going to crimethink.com.
Meow, 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 meow. God damn it! These cats got into this script again. Hey, Charyan. Thanks. Okay, sorry about that. Besides these articles, posters, and zines, we would love to take this time to draw your attention to these other recent publications from CrimethInc. We have Punk, Dangerous Utopia Revisiting the Relationships Between Punk and Anarchism, published on December 13th, and Producing Transdermal Estrogen, a Do-It-Yourself Guide, published on December 15th. Reaching back into November a bit, they also published a great piece on abortions in Poland entitled Abortions Without Borders, How Feminists and Anarchists Defy Polish Anti-Abortion Laws, as well as a rundown on the Brazilian elections entitled Left Electoralism, Fascist Direct Action, and Anti-Fascist Resistance, the Brazilian Elections of 2022. People have been homeless on this land ever since colonization brought the very concept to bear. In Aberdeen, the homeless and transient have always gravitated to the banks of the Chehalis River, on the south edge of downtown Aberdeen. Ever since the logging days of the 19th century, this has been a home for people with nowhere else to go. So I'd like to get into some of these reports from the Daily World. So, Charyan, you're somewhat familiar with the clearing of the old river camp. When do you think this whole process got started?
Well, they cleared the camp in 2019, so I imagine it was simple as a couple months process, just getting all their ducks in a row and all their red tape and everything.
Well, we begin in 2016. The story starts when a local contracting company purchased a lot on the banks of the river to start clearing it up. I'll present here a detailed history of the last 6 years of unbelievable harassment of the homeless at the hands of the City of Aberdeen. So the first date for this article that I have here is August 23rd, 2016, and it says, Group of riverfront homeless campers need to move. Private property along the Chehalis River in Aberdeen soon won't be a welcome spot for the homeless to camp and trespass because of the new owner, Ronglins, Inc., wants to clean up the lot. So the very first thing that happens out of all of this is Ronglins buying that lot down next to this spot. So
they chose to buy a spot that was a known camp.
Yes and no, because the property that they bought and are still at today is not the property that would eventually become the site of the eviction. But there were campers all up and down there before Ronglins moved in. And so the thing that kicked off this entire episode, starting in 2016, was Ronglins moving into that spot where they are now. August 27th, 2016, James Horak and William Hoham told Aberdeen City Council members at a meeting Wednesday that despite the perception of many people in the community, not everyone within the homeless population is a substance user or dealing with mental health challenges. So this was a city council meeting that happened shortly after that, in which people started voicing concerns about the homeless, and the homeless people attended and were able to kind of push back on the city and the right wing's attacks on them. Because the story has been since the very beginning that obviously every homeless person is a drug addict or suffering from mental health disorders.
Yeah, no, that's the stereotype. I got a little cousin who, like, he's had people trying to run him down in, like, big pickup trucks because he's got a backpack and a hoodie, and so they just assume he's, like, a tweaker or whatever, and he's, like, a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that live out here that, you know, I don't know how to put it, look shabby. It's just kind of the look out here. And so there's no way, like, people going around assuming people are homeless and then assuming because they're homeless they're a tweaker, and then that gives them the right to do violence against them is kind of insane. So moving from August to September 2016, on the 14th of September, the Daily World published an article saying that up to 75 people are camping along the river near downtown Aberdeen, but one of the property owners asked them to leave. Homeless people encamped on River Street along the Chehalis River in Aberdeen are on the move again after property owner Michael Lang asked the city to take action against the squatters. So the Michael Lang guy is the original property owner of that place who ended up selling it to the city later on. It says here, police and a cleanup crew hired by Lang were at the site Monday. This is back in 2016, mind you. Advocates were attempting to seek a legal way to stop the expulsion but hadn't yet found an answer, they said Tuesday. Some people living there packed up what they could and left, but clergy, that's chaplains, acting on behalf of the campers, said that Lang relented and ultimately decided to allow people time to pack up and move at a more relaxed pace. So all the way back in 2016, this guy is trying to get people off of his property, which is the neighboring property to Ronglands.
I actually remember that happening a little bit when that was going down. They had, like, police officers that were harassing the chaplains and whatnot for bringing, like, food and clothes and stuff like that, threatening jail time. I think someone actually did go to jail. I'm not 100% sure on the details.
Yeah, well, that's when some of this starts, but they do that for the next several years. That's a pattern. So, moving to October 25th, 2016, we have a statewide funding source considered crucial for dealing with homelessness is slated to start shrinking next year, according to a speaker at Tuesday's meeting of the Grays Harbor County Housing Coalition. The goal is to successfully lobby for a change in the law before the fee for such services begin decreasing in June 2017 from $58 to $48 for each transaction recording. The fee is scheduled to drop even more significantly in June 2019 from $48 to $18. With the $48 fee, Grays Harbor County is estimated to receive $1.117 million for homelessness programs from 2017 to 2019. The amount would fall to just $419,000 from 2019 to 2021 if the money allocated for such assistance drops to $18 per document. In Grays Harbor County, these reductions would translate into 224 people not being housed. The number of people statewide not housed would rise by more than 22,500. So this is where the money for Grays Harbor's homeless programs comes from, in large part. Is from recording fees.
And so that's like your Section 8 housing, your food stamps.
No, that's coming from other state programs. This is specifically the county level programs this is the programs that would pay for shelter during the cold months or something like that.
Okay.
So the County Housing Coalition has its own programs and agenda that it writes every, I think, 10 years or something like that. And so how they get funded, at least partially, is this recording fee. So every time someone in Grays Harbor County records a document with the county, you pay a fee. Part of that fee goes to homeless services. And they're talking about going down from June 2017, they're going from $58 planned to $18, which would drop it from $1.17 million to just $419,000, leaving 224 people out on the streets. So this is why there's only shelter for 25 beds, essentially. So that's in 2016. The day after, a downtown business owner complained to the city about conditions at and around the nearly vacant Sea First office building at the corner of Broadway and Market. The structure's ground-level parking garage has become a shelter to some local homeless people when the weather is bad. Scott Olson of City Center Pharmacy, you know where that is, at 108 East Wishka, which is just across the alley from the office building, said more homeless people are congregating around the area. Do you know what building they're talking about here?
It's the current CCAP building right now, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, there used to be a bank or whatever that was in there.
Yeah. So, October 26, 2016, downtown business owner is complaining to the city about too many homeless people using that big CCAP parking garage as a shelter, which, now that CCAP is there, is well and truly locked off with fencing and gates. So moving into 2018 now.
Didn't they have like an all-hours porta potty there that they put a lock on?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, here you go, but we've solved your problem. Here's a porta potty. Now we're going to lock you out of it.
Yeah, well, that was the city, but that's where they located it. All right, so moving to February of 2018 now. We're taking a bit of a step. Aberdeen City Hall was packed Wednesday evening for a workshop on homelessness with a crowd of more than 100 that included homeless people, representatives from homeless assistance programs, and local business owners. It was a significantly larger turnout than typical city council meetings, and some city council members took note. At the beginning of the meeting, this council read aloud a letter from Mike Lang, that's the owner of the property, who owns a significant portion of the riverfront property along the Chehalis River, where many homeless people live in tents. He originally purchased the land 25 years ago for $350,000 to eventually be his, quote, retirement nest egg. The letter reads, and spent 20 years commercial fishing in the Bering Sea to pay for it. Since his return, Lang writes that he now feels like the area's garbage man, because he has to deal with the trash left behind by campers. He says he has experienced harassment from tent residents while cleaning up the trash, had his tires slashed once while cleaning, and has been unable to sell the property. Lang concludes his letter by writing that he cannot think of a better location for the campers to inhabit, but that he is overwhelmed and needs help to deal with it. Quote, I can't think of a better place for these people to camp where they have water and lots of driftwood for their campfires, wrote Lang. I'm sure it's better than if they had camped along the sidewalks in downtown, doorways, or people's backyards. In any event, I need help. I can't afford this burden. End quote. While city council members did discuss a number of potential solutions for homelessness, many of them expressed their frustrations that they've been hearing the same problems and solutions for years without much actually getting done. So here we are in 2018 with, like, sort of the big city council meeting that, like, started the ball rolling on the eviction process. We have over 100 people coming in, probably soapists are in the mix at this point, having been around for a long time. And this owner of the property, Michael Lang, is kind of saying, let them have it.
Yeah.
He's kind of saying, like, if the city could just help me in dealing with the burden of the trash, I think this is a good spot for them.
Yeah, I'm actually fairly familiar with the Langs, and they tried to do what they could to help. Maybe not in the best, or they tried to do what they could to help, but ultimately they were failed by the city, just as these homeless people have been failed by the city.
Yeah, and the part where it says they expressed their frustrations that they've been hearing the same problems and solutions for years without much actually getting done. And nowadays we look back fondly at the river camp as like this sort of stable place where people were able to actually build up. I mean, they say tents here, but people had structures there. And, you know, a sense of community that has just been shattered ever since the eviction. All right. So immediately after that, as a follow-up, that was February 8th or February 9th. This is February 16th. So the next week, as a follow-up to last week's crowded workshop to discuss homelessness, a similarly large number of people showed up to Wednesday's Aberdeen City Council meeting to formally get their opinions heard. The speaker... Okay, so I was wrong. That one was a workshop, not even a city council meeting. But at the next city council meeting, same thing. A bunch of people show up to get their opinions heard. The speakers had a wide range of opinions, from former homeless people and non-homeless locals who felt the homeless should be treated with more compassion, to business owners saying that the homeless people have stolen from them or made business difficult. And I love that distinction. This is from the Daily World drawing this distinction. There's former homeless people and non-homeless locals who feel the homeless should be treated with more compassion on one side, and business owners on the other side. That is just so the pattern. Several of the speakers said that the council members' comments at the workshop were unfairly critical of homeless people. One speaker, Lisa Chappelle from Hoquiam, said that she was disappointed and felt that all the solutions were focused on ordinances to police homeless people instead of committing to offering more assistance, such as more housing. Some local downtown business owners showed up to speak as well, and said that while they feel sympathetic for the local homeless population, they are tired of having increased garbage and other side effects of homelessness that hurt business. Ilan Karev from Grace Harbor Guns said that he wants to advocate for homeless people, but is upset with its impact on the downtown commerce. So this is a refrain that we still hear today too. Business owners saying, you know, I would love to support homeless people, but fill in the blank, whatever reason.
And it's that lack of support that just puts more homeless people on your front porch as it is. Like, it's a nonsense argument.
It's a real punching down. It's like, my business isn't doing well. Foot traffic is down, commerce is down, the economy's bad. Why on earth would that be the homeless person's fault, you know, who's living on the streets of your city?
When people are experiencing these issues across the country.
Yeah, like all of these boom and bust cycles of the economy don't just impact Aberdeen. Like, it's not just a local issue. I don't see why the instinct of business is always to blame the homeless. Like, you couldn't say necessarily that the instinct of people is to blame the homeless, because we have a lot of people here. In every single instance here, we have either homeless people or former homeless people or just housed people with compassion standing up and saying what you're doing is wrong.
It's because the business ultimately has no reason to be concerned or connected with or responsible for what's going on in the community. Their bottom line is their own personal profits. They could feel care and sympathetic to whatever issue or cause that's happening, but
it's always that but. But I gotta make money. But I gotta turn a profit. And it's not, you know, and we know some business owners in Aberdeen, and they're not bad people. It is the effect of capitalism that requires you to sort of, for some reason, like, punch down when it comes to
who gets resources.
Who gets resources, but also who gets blame for the problems that are real. You know, it's like a real problem that your business is suffering or whatever, and understandably you need money to pay for your rent and your family. But it's like, why is it always to look at the homeless person and cast blame on them instead of saying, well, why if I don't pay my landlord, am I going to be homeless? That's just as easy a question to ask. All right, so we're moving along here from February of 2018 to May of 2018. And we have Aberdeen Mayor Eric Larson, the new up-and-coming youngin', the little liberal that could, says he wants the city to purchase a piece of riverfront property that has been controversial due to many homeless people living there. He says he'll present his plan to the city council at next Wednesday's meeting. The land is owned by Mike Lang, who has tried unsuccessfully to clear the homeless camps and vehicles. Moving on to May 17th, 2018. A 43-year-old woman attempting to cross the train tracks near South Michigan Street and State Street just after midnight Wednesday was struck by a train in an accident that required amputations of both her legs. The area is very near the large homeless camp along the Chehalis River. It stretches for blocks between the railroad tracks and the river. Now that's interesting. That's an interesting headline, because you have a story about a lady getting struck by a train. And then, for some reason, they decided to add on this part at the end, saying how close it is to the large homeless camp. Again, just to bring blame to, like, all of the homeless people in town, because one person got hit by a train. So what this shows is that they were trying to kick these people out prior to that accident, like well in advance of that. You could say 2 years, but you could at least say that there's a report the day before saying that Eric Larson wanted to buy that property. I mean, what do you think they were trying to buy that property?
Yeah, they don't just decide to do things. It takes much time and planning and arguing and everything else with city council to get any little thing done. So when they start making moves, there is a plan in place.
Yeah, and we'll see later that Michael Lang and Eric Larson were in conversation prior to this about, like the price of the property and stuff like that. So that must have been, this is going from February to May, that must have been the time period in which they were planning on making that purchase. But I think even before that, you could look back and say that they had their eye on kicking these people out. I mean, as far back as 2016, Michael Lang was trying to get them evicted and take action against the squatters, as they said. Like, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this look back, is because there's so much fuzziness in people's memories around here in terms of the actual, like, chronological order of events. And this is one thing that I hear over and over and over again as like the initial sort of event that kicked off these river evictions. And it's really not. It might have become like a useful talking point, but they were trying to evict them from the river long before this lady got hit by a train. So hopefully these episodes can bring some clarity to the local conversations around the history of this topic.
So what's next on the timeline?
So May 25th, 2018, about a week later, the City of Aberdeen is nearing the purchase of a controversial, they keep saying controversial, the property is controversial, of a controversial property along the Chehalis River where many homeless people live in tents, shacks, and vehicles. During Wednesday's Aberdeen City Council meeting, the council approved a motion authorizing Mayor Eric Larson to negotiate a final price for the city to purchase the land from its owner, Mike Lang. The motion allows Larson to finalize a price for the property for no more than $295,000. Larson later told the Daily World that the maximum was the amount he settled on in recent discussions with Lang. According to the county assessor's website, the property is valued at $609,840 for taxing purposes. So that didn't take long, at least from the time he announced it. It was 1 week, and they're nearing the purchase. Okay, so they haven't formally said anything about evictions at this point, but there's really no clear reason why the city would be buying this property if that wasn't the intent. Alright, so 1 month later in June of 2018, we have another city council meeting. Mayor Eric Larson expressed frustration over criticism from advocates for the homeless aimed at the city and himself. So we have some protesters. He said he wished a broad coalition of the community would come together to discuss and address the homelessness issue, as has been done numerous times. Larson was responding in part to a large protest in front of Aberdeen City Hall on June 15th. The gathering featured speeches from Bishop Michael Curry of the Episcopal Church, who was visiting Aberdeen that day, and organizers pushing for the city to add affordable housing and better address homelessness. So when Mayor Eric Larson gets pushed from the left, saying you need to address homelessness and add affordable housing, he gets upset.
Scratch a liberal, a fascist bleeds.
Alright, next month, July 14th, 2018. The City of Aberdeen is moving forward with its plan to purchase land along the Chehalis River and eventually evict the homeless residents. So I don't know when that became part of the plan, but yeah, at least here in 2018 we have them planning to evict. At Wednesday's City Council meeting, Mayor Eric Larson said he had reached a handshake agreement with the real estate agent for Mike Lang to buy the property, but that he hasn't signed a contract yet. Lang owns a strip of riverfront property where approximately 100 people have been living in tents, motor vehicles, and makeshift shacks. Ultimately, we will be removing people from the property, and will move to do that as quickly as is reasonable, said Larson. So this is Mayor Eric Larson's attempt to help these people.
Is by evicting them.
Yes. They were saying it was too unsafe to be down there, out the river. Not just because of the train tracks, but because of trash, and because of needles, and because of, all that sort of stuff. Sanitation. It was...
everything they cry about today.
Yeah, all the problems that have been much exacerbated by them evicting people. Alright, so that's July. We will be removing them as quickly as possible, said Larson. So September 2018. They've already purchased the land here. The City of Aberdeen, recent purchaser of land occupied by the city's largest homeless camp, is preparing to clean up trash at the riverfront property and is looking at ways to add low-barrier shelter that could house people living there. On Friday, staff from the Aberdeen Public Works went down to the homeless camp along the Chehalis River to meet with those living there and explain that the city will soon be cleaning brush and removing trash from the area as part of a longer process to remove all people from the property. It's just so gross how they talk sometimes. We're looking to outline an initial cleanup timeline so there are no surprises for the people on the property that could create confusion or a safety issue, said Aberdeen Mayor Eric Larson at Wednesday's City Council meeting. Well, like being evicted from your home. The cleanup could also include adding temporary garbage service and portable toilets, which is really all they needed, if you think about it.
Right.
Imagine how much nightmarish pain and suffering and hardships could have been avoided if all they had done in 2018 was add porta potties and garbage service to the camp right there.
Right, they'd
have built condos by now.
Yeah.
It's so upsetting. They have surveyed the camp in recent weeks and reported that more than 50 people are living there now. So that's down from 100. And they're always undercounting because it's a point-in-time count what they do. They have also told Larson that right now the community doesn't have places for all of them to go. Larson said he's looking at ways to add temporary low-barrier shelter. Quote, "It looks like at this point that in order to address the individuals on the property, we're probably going to need to look at some level of temporary low-barrier shelter space off-site from the property," said Larson. So that's a realization that he's having in September. After deciding to buy the property and after deciding to evict people, he's realized that in order to deal with the people on the property, they're going to need some sort of temporary low-barrier shelter.
See, that's not the type of planning that happens from planning with these people's health and safety in mind. That's the type of planning that comes from other goals and these people being an afterthought.
Exactly. Larson said he is working with the Housing Resource Coordinator Cassie Lentz from Grays Harbor Public Health to look at the costs and potential locations for a low-barrier shelter. It might be a vacant parcel, it might be a building, said Larson. We're looking at options, and we're looking for support and guidance from the people who do this and are experts in it. Low-barrier shelters are typically less strict than some shelters that will turn people away if they aren't sober. Members of the Coastal Community Action Program and Grays Harbor Public Health have spent the past couple weeks speaking with people living on the riverfront property to identify how many are living there and what their needs are. In recent months, Larson has said that the city intends to move all residents off the property because of safety concerns, citing that as the main reason the city bought the property. So this is the seed of the idea that becomes that Michigan Street property.
The Tassel Temporary Assisted Living, or I forget what the acronym was.
Yeah, no, I guess you're right, because the Michigan Street property comes later as a permanent solution, proposed solution.
Michigan Street. You're not talking about the one right behind the...
No, but they are talking about a temporary... He keeps saying temporary here, so you're right. They had no plans up front for anything, and then after buying the property realized, okay, we're going to need a temporary place to put these people. And then a little while later, we'll see that they realize we're going to need a permanent place to put these people. And then the pandemic hits, and that's when the temporary place that they've put them becomes a permanent place for the entirety of the pandemic. All right, September 26th. The City of Aberdeen is moving forward with its plan to clear the Chehalis River waterfront homeless camp, and Mayor Eric Larson says work to remove vehicles, tents, and other temporary structures from the property will soon begin. This is in September, so we're going straight into winter here. In a news release from Larson's office on Tuesday, he said that the city has now removed much of the garbage and overgrown vegetation in the city-owned area, and will move on to the next step toward eventually moving everyone from the property. Dozens of people are living along the river in makeshift tents or vehicles. The camp goes back years, but in the past couple of years seems to have grown dramatically. In order to control traffic on the property, Larson said a metal gate restricting vehicle access would be closed on Wednesday, September 26th at 5 p.m. Now this is a big deal. This is the inciting incident for the lawsuit that Chaplin brings. This is when they start to kind of like lock people out from accessing the property.
Yeah, no, it's all a very insidious project. They make the plan to evict people right before winter, and a whole new population of homeless people who don't know all the steps and things that you might need to do to survive out in the streets during this time of year, and then goes on to not only take the process in evicting these people during the winter, but tries everything they can to block people from giving them any kind of resources, so they just sit there, starve, and die.
And you notice we've also gone down from over 100 to more than 50 down to dozens.
And where are all these people going? They're saying this is a growing problem.
That's an eviction in and of itself. We've already evicted, over half of the people just by threat of eviction? So by the time the actual eviction comes and they're kicking out maybe 24 people, they can say, well, we only evicted 24 people, when in fact they've evicted over 100 people.
Well, that's even if those numbers are even accurate and people did leave. How are they going to say that we have this growing, which we do, this growing homeless epidemic where more and more people are becoming homeless, more and more people are going on the streets, but somehow there's less people at camp, less people camping on the street that they have to evict as time goes on? How do you have this both ways?
Yeah. Well, what they're doing here is manufacturing the next crisis, where you have a bunch of people strewn out along the sidewalks and front doorsteps of businesses downtown. So this all happened because of business owner complaints. Let's keep that in mind. This process was initiated not because of public safety or because of the safety of the campers. This was initiated because of complaints from downtown business owners back in 2016. And now in 2022, the biggest complainers of, we have all these people in our doorways, business owners.
So what's the next step, business owners? What's your next brilliant idea?
It's just unbelievable. All right. So in November 2nd, they publish an article about Reverend Sarah Monroe from Chaplains on the Harbor. It says, for the past 5 years, Reverend Sarah Monroe from Chaplains on the Harbor has served the role as a pastor and service provider for the more than 100 homeless people who lived in tents, shacks, and vehicles along the Chehalis River in Aberdeen. The city recently purchased the land where most of the homeless are camping, as the city officials work towards eventually removing everyone living on the property. The city's public works department has begun regulating which homeless assistance groups can get the city's written permission to enter the property, and Monroe was denied access. Monroe said she is upset with what she sees as the city's attempts to make it more difficult for the people living on the river to get help. So they're cutting them off from resources, and this is what initiates that lawsuit. This is why she sues them.
And going back to, like, the business owners, like, kicking all this off as well, like, if the whole problem of these people was the fact that they were on private property, and then the city bought that property with no intention of doing anything, what was the point of evicting them?
Yeah.
The guy who was at a loss got his money out of it, Michael Lang. The city bought the property from him. He's able to reinvest into something else. The city isn't doing anything with this property. It's just riverfront property. What was the point of evicting them? And then immediately evicting them in winter, and then blocking them from getting any kind of resources or help from charity organizations or as state officials.
Yeah. Like, in the weeks preceding the eviction, we're going to stop any service providers that we don't like from coming in to help you. It's really gross. Okay. So here we have the first lawsuit. On November 21st, 2018, the City of Aberdeen, its mayor, and a city administrator have been sued in federal court by 3 people who say the city's restrictions to the Chehalis River front homeless camp violate their First Amendment rights. The suit was filed in Tacoma's federal court on Monday. The names the city, Mayor Eric Larson, and city engineer Chris Koski, who drafted the rules for who can visit the homeless camp, as defendants. The lawsuit was filed by Reverend Sarah Monroe, who has regularly assisted and provided religious services for the homeless people living at the now city-owned property, along with Tim Quigg and April Bowling as the plaintiffs. The city recently denied Monroe's application to access the property to provide services. And in December 12th, at a hearing in Tacoma, U.S. District Judge Ronald B. Layton said the plaintiffs are allowed to enter the property, and the city's permit system for restricting visitors needs to change. He said, quote, "This structure is not going to survive," who later added, "This is run like a jail right now." A jail. Just like Tassel was run for the next, year and a half.
Got your guards that you gotta check in with. Can't have anybody come in and visit.
Even worse. I mean, Tassel, they didn't have guards at this point. You know what I mean? So, what they were doing was illegal then, and felt like jail to this judge, but it got even more restrictive once they actually evicted them to the temporary alternative shelter location behind City Hall. Then they were actually physically fenced in, with one entrance and a guard shack. So that's December 12th, 2018. January 2nd, 2019 is our next entry. Anyone can freely visit Aberdeen's riverfront homeless camp during certain hours each day now that a judge has approved new policies as part of a federal lawsuit against the city for its management of the camp. The policies, drafted and agreed upon by both parties in the lawsuit, eliminates the city's controversial visitor permit system for the homeless encampment, where over 100 people are living in tents, vehicles, and makeshift shacks between railroad tracks and the Chehalis River. So they won that lawsuit. That was a pretty clear violation of their First Amendment rights. Moving to January 11th, 2019. The Aberdeen City Council passed 2 items regarding the access to the city's riverfront homeless camp at Wednesday night's council meeting, part of an agreement in a federal lawsuit against the city. The first was a resolution that adopts the new rules for people wishing to enter the riverfront property. The most notable change is that visitors to the property do not need to obtain any permits or advance permission to do so. The resolution also outlines new time, manner, and place restrictions, like not allowing visits outside of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. hours, and that weapons, alcohol, and illegal drugs are prohibited on the property. It was unanimously passed without discussion by council members. The council also passed the first reading of an ordinance that supplements the camp's regulations, allowing the public a chance to give feedback before it's potentially approved at a third reading in a few weeks. So this policy is the one that got agreed to by both sides, which is kind of incredible to me. The idea that you're not going to allow visits outside of 8 p.m. to 8 or 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah, that's
8
egregious.
p.m. Like, some people don't even get off until after 8 p.m. And the weapons, alcohol, and illegal drugs are prohibited on the property. I mean, that's just like saying there's laws.
Yeah, like
none of those.
What's the difference if I want to go visit my cousin after 8 o'clock or not? It's not somehow more nefarious just because it's, or even nefarious at all. I mean, like, people should just be able to, like, why should people who are in housing be punished from being seen from and barred from seeing their friends and their family because they're not in the best places?
Yeah, I can't make it there before 8, so I can't see you. I can't bring by that pack of clothes or that warm meal that I was going to bring by because it's after 8 o'clock now. Alright, so April 13th, 2019. The Aberdeen City Council took a major step this week in prohibiting a large swath of riverfront property from being used as a homeless camp. The council passed the first reading of an ordinance denying public access to the area, which was purchased by the city last year. It has been the area's largest homeless encampment for years. Mayor Eric Larson submitted the ordinance, which states that after it's passed, the property would be closed to all public access. Citizens spoke both for and against the ordinance at the public comment period of Wednesday's council meeting, including a couple homeless people from the encampment who asked that they be given more time so they might find alternative places to stay. There were 10 votes in favor of the ordinance, 1 no vote, and 1 council member who abstained in the voice vote. A public hearing on the ordinance will be held at next city council meeting, April 24th, as well as the second of 3 readings. So I would really love to know what our local far-right fascists thought of all of this anti-homeless ordinances being pushed through by the young liberal mayor, Eric Larson.
I imagine they were mad. They didn't go far enough. You're going to allow people to see their family members before 8 p.m.? No, they shouldn't be allowed there at all. In fact, actually, they should go into this camp where they have to, like, do work, and there's a prison guard.
Yeah.
Or sorry, not a prison guard. I can't use that language. It's
a safety officer.
Yeah, safety officer.
You're right. But I think,
like, what are you guys pushing towards?
I think that's
here?
another thing that people forget is kind of like what players initiated this ball rolling, and that it was really like a liberal politician that got this whole thing off the ground. I mean, not just Eric Larson, like the city council too at the time was more liberal than it is now. And
yeah, no, where the movement starts is with some pretty nefarious people that like, it's the city council then just up and aside, you know what, we're just going to start fucking with homeless people. Like, there were specific people who pushed them in that direction.
We're basically looking at the liberal policies that the right reacted to with the election of the far-right extremists that we have now. Alright, April 24th, another federal lawsuit has been filed against the City of Aberdeen over its dealing with the homeless population. This time, it's an attempt to stop Mayor Eric Larson's proposal for an ordinance that would clear the city's major homeless encampment along the Chehalis River. The lawsuit was filed Monday in U.S. District Court in Tacoma and asked for an injunction to prevent the city from moving the many people living in tents, shacks, and vehicles along the river unless alternative shelter is provided for them. It was filed by 8 people currently living along the river, along with the Reverend Sarah Monroe and April Bowling, who were both plaintiffs in an earlier lawsuit to stop the city's permit system for visitors to the homeless camp. So this is really the more impactful lawsuit that people don't talk about as much, I think. They kind of get some of these... I think they kind of confused the fact that there were 2 lawsuits into just one lawsuit. And so that's where you get a lot of the, like... they made a bunch of money off this lawsuit kind of conspiracy theory stuff that goes around in town, because they did win that first lawsuit. And they got a little bit of money off of it. But the second lawsuit is really the much more impactful and bigger lawsuit, in my opinion. So moving to April 26, 2019, the Aberdeen City Council moved a step closer towards clearing. It's just always one step closer. For months and months and months, it's one step closer to removing the city's homeless encampment along the Chehalis River by unanimously passed the second reading Wednesday of a proposed ordinance. Mayor Eric Larson proposed an ordinance that, if passed at the final reading May 8th, would prompt the city to clear the homeless encampment and prevent any public access to it. May 8th, a federal judge in Tacoma granted a 30-day stay or hold on the City of Aberdeen's plan to clear people from the city's riverfront homeless encampment, which otherwise might have happened as soon as Saturday. The coalition of people who live at the camp and 2 activists who have worked with them have sued the city to stop the evictions. During a hearing Tuesday, Judge Ronald B. Layton asked that the 2 parties negotiate a solution and come up with a plan where the homeless individuals will go if they are not allowed to live at the camp along the Chehalis River. Layton did not approve or deny the plaintiff's request for an injunction to stop the evictions temporarily, but he warned there would be consequences if the city moved to evict people before the 30-day stay was up. So this is what, people talk about this locally as like a win. And I don't see it as a win really at all. I think this is the judge saying, I want you guys to settle this. And I don't think that they should have settled at all. I think that they should have kept pushing, because what the city was doing was clearly illegal. And if they had actually pushed that lawsuit forward, I think they could have won it in a much bigger way than getting a 30-day stay. He says, quote here, "Mark my words, though, if there's any change, any roust, there will be hell to pay," Layton said to the city's side of the courtroom. "Get your negotiators and solve this problem." Along with imposing a 30-day stay, Layton called on city officials to do more to solve the city's riverfront homelessness issue. "You guys have got to get an oar and put your oar in the water and start contributing to solving this problem," said Layton. He added that this case was, quote, "one of 2 or 3 cases in 18 years he's seen that cries out for good faith and goodwill between neighbors." And now it's time for a musical break with The Looting Song by the Window Smashing Job Creators from their album The Power of Friendship. Hit it!
My trust, the future is unraveling. This world treats property like a prophecy handed down from heaven, as if it is too sacred to critique. And it will turn your good intentions into weapons that are used against you. Then it will try to buy and sell everything. tune, then selling your soul until you're dead. Planting bombs into the soil till the future starts to boil, and soon there'll not be anything left. But the other day I had a dream where we all ran away from here, and there was enough stuff to go around. The path to get from here to there's foggy, but together we can make it clear, and then share all of the loot that we have found. We can share all of the loot that we have found. We can share all of the loot that we have found. We can share all of the loot that we have found. We can share all of the loot that we have found.
May 10th, 2019. The Aberdeen City Council finalizes the ordinance to clear the city's riverfront homeless camp following a vote Wednesday night, and pushed back its effective date 1 month to comply with the federal lawsuit ruling earlier this week. As opposed to the original ordinance that would have taken effect after the meeting, Councilman Pete Shave made an amendment to push back the effective date to June 10th, the first Monday after the federal judge's 30-day stay to hold off the evictions would end. The final vote was 8-0 in favor of the evictions. 4 council members were absent from the meeting and did not vote. Can you believe that?
This isn't worth my time or attention. I'm just gonna...
Just not even there. Like, who knows how they would have voted, if they had been there, but just couldn't make the time, I guess. That's Tim Alstrom, Jeff Cook, Frank Gordon, and John Mackey, all absent for this vote. Mayor Eric Larson was also not present at the meeting, and said by phone he was out of town for a trade show as part of his other job. Last night's reading was the third and final vote to pass the ordinance from Larson's office. The law intends to prohibit all public access to the riverfront homeless camps and clear people from the site, which Larson has said is for public safety reasons. On Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Ronald B. Layton said the city and a group of 10 plaintiffs, which includes the homeless people and advocates suing the city over the ordinance, must work together to negotiate a solution for where the people in the riverfront camps will move to. So all the judge did was put that 30-day hold in terms of evicting them. The main effect of his ruling here was that they would be evicted in 30 days, but they need to work together to find a place for them to go afterwards. So we move from May 10th, 2019 to June 11th, 2019. Aberdeen Mayor Eric Larson is interested in creating a homeless mitigation site at an undeveloped plot of land at 303 East Market Street, next to the Aberdeen Transit Station, which is currently owned by the Grays Harbor Transit Authority. The Grays Harbor Transit Board considered a proposal from Larson's office for the City of Aberdeen at Tuesday's meeting, which requests the Transit Board approve a lease of the property at an annual amount of $12,000. What do you think they said?
What was $12,000?
The lease amount. They were trying to lease this undeveloped plot of land.
Knowing this city, they probably weren't too the happiest.
1 day later, on June 12th, the Grays Harbor Transit Board on Tuesday unanimously denied a lease proposal from the City of Aberdeen to rent a vacant lot next to the downtown bus station and turn it into a homeless mitigation facility. On the 19th, Grays Harbor County Board of Commissioners has approved 2 agreements for the dispersal of grant money to provide rental assistance to the chronically homeless and study the need for a low-barrier homeless shelter. So this is actually the low-barrier homeless shelter that chaplains had applied for that they denied. This is when it was in June of 2019 that the Board of Commissioners approved 2 grants to provide rental assistance to the homeless and study the need for a low-barrier shelter. On July 5th, 2019, the City of Aberdeen plans to clear the large, long-time homeless encampment along the Chehalis River as early as next week, Mayor Eric Larson says. now that a federal judge has denied a temporary restraining order that sought to halt the city's plans. Larson said today that a 72-hour notice to vacate will be delivered to the inhabitants Monday, and that anyone who doesn't leave before Thursday, July 11th, will be forcibly removed. On Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Ronald Layton in Tacoma rejected the delay sought by plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit who have argued that clearing the camp is unconstitutional if the city doesn't provide other spaces where the homeless people can reside. And then there's a piece here about the mayor, Eric Larson, not really understanding the judge's orders and how to interpret them. He said that the judge's orders could be interpreted to say that the city can't enforce its public camping laws and clear the site. The city intends to clarify the matter before moving forward. And then, 1 day later, facing an imminent closure of Aberdeen's large homeless encampment, the Aberdeen City Council will consider a proposal to establish a temporary shelter in the parking lot behind City Hall Wednesday night. The fenced-in area would have 38 city-provided tents that people can move into, according to a diagram on the council agenda. Mayor Eric Larson said that it would be only a short-term facility to be used while the city looks into a permanent site elsewhere. He said that there is a specific site under consideration but declined to say where it is. The proposal is to allocate $30,000 of city funds to establish the shelter and maintain it for 1 month. About half that amount is to pay for the 24-hour security through a private company, while the rest is a one-time cost to establish the site with fencing, tents, portable toilets, and trash receptacles, Larson said.
Seems like it would have been cheaper just to use APD.
Overall, because they're talking about the one-time startup fee here, so overall, when you look at the numbers, and we went through this in the Harbor Rat report a long time ago, it's something like 90% of the cost totally for the whole time that it ran went to that security. So when they talk about how much it cost, which really was not that much, most of that was for that stupid security guard. And what they're doing here is they're saying they're going to offer a site with fencing, tents, portable toilets, and trash receptacles. That seems like they could have just provided portable toilets and trash receptacles where they were.
Yeah, no, it's just so simple how all the arguments and the complaints about the homeless go. It's there's trash everywhere. Oh, there's they're pissing shit in the streets. Oh, there's needles on the ground. It's like, all right, but we're also going to refuse to give you anywhere to safely dispose of your needles. We're going to refuse you any space to, dispose of your garbage, and we're going to prevent you from being able to use the bathroom anywhere. They just manufacture their own problems.
Yeah, so they can rile their base up and get more votes in the next election, all to the detriment of the most vulnerable people in the city. Alright, so we move to July 16th, 2019. Personally supervising the City of Aberdeen's controversial plan to house displaced homeless people after clearing the city's longtime encampment, Mayor Eric Larson spent his Monday evening signing people up at the new city's overnight homeless shelter in the parking lot behind City Hall. As individuals entered the cloth-covered privacy fences, they each provided Larson information such as names, whether they had pets, and if they had a partner sharing the tent, before he handed each a sleeping bag. And there was a nice photo op of this in the paper.
Gotta get your PR in somewhere.
So I did not know that he personally supervised the opening. I found that kind of interesting, because he really seems to think that he's doing these guys a huge favor or something. To call, after they destroyed their actual shelters, to call this a homeless shelter is a stretch. It's literally just tents in a parking lot.
What's the Malcolm X quote? It goes something along the lines of stab me in the back, pull the knife halfway out, and call that justice.
Yeah. Next article is the clearing of the camp. That's July 19th, 2019. The City of Aberdeen began clearing the large, long-time homeless encampment along the Chehalis River Thursday, using excavators to demolish campsites that some had called home for years. Shacks, tents, and other homemade structures. City crews said that they only targeted shacks after checking whether they were abandoned Thursday and Friday, avoiding campsites with people still in them.
I'm not sure if I'd trust the Daily World's coverage on that. Maybe that's the case, but I know there's incidents like with the camps in Southside some years later where they had actually someone had like a tree house amongst other camps and other structures and whatnot at the Southside camp, and they cut down that tree with the person in it.
I remember that.
So I'm not 100% maybe that is the case, but I don't know if I trust the Daily World's coverage on that.
Well, it's interesting to hear them say this part about, demolishing campsites that some had called home for years. Like, there's a level of recognition in what's going on there that's kind of shocking to see in a Daily World headline, given how anti-homeless they typically are. Demolishing with excavators something that people have called home for years is never not like a viscerally disgusting.
It's like liberal land acknowledgments. Like, we're going to acknowledge that we took this land from the native indigenous populations, but we're not going to give the land back. We'll acknowledge that there has been a wrong here. We're not going to fix it.
So here's a pretty gross article about how the city plans to now sell the property now that they've cleared it of everyone and actually make a profit off of the sale. July 26, 2019. With the encampment now cleared of all people, the city plans to finish leveling it before putting it up for sale. The city purchased the property nearly a year ago for $295,000 from a longtime private owner. Larson has said that the city was only purchasing it to address public health and safety concerns caused by the large homeless encampment. So there it's apparent that the public health and safety concerns were not for the safety of the campers. They're seeing the campers as a threat to public safety.
The public safety is in the hands of the city. You're not going to offer... If they didn't offer everybody trash services, trash would pile in the streets and it'd be a health hazard. The city needs to give people options. If you don't give people options for things that, using the bathroom and having a place to throw away your trash and whatnot, of course it's going to be a health hazard. They don't want to live in that health hazard any more than you want it in the streets. And then the city turns around and, again, creates these problems. They decided that they were going to destroy this whole population who had at least some stability, and throw that to the side, do everything they can to eradicate them, kill them off, make sure they can't get resources and everything else, so that they can make a profit. And meanwhile, they've dumped everybody else on the streets, but right on the business's front steps.
Where they know people will complain more.
And everything they've done so far, it's just been one step closer. One step closer to what?
To Terry Emmert.
When you look on Facebook and the way people talk about this situation, it gets even more concerning as you hear people start talking about shit like work camps. Like, someone's been talking about, setting up some sort of facility out near the juvenile or whatever.
We reported on that in the Harbor Rat report too. We'll get to that. Alright, so it says here that there was at one point 108 people living on the property, but it's decreased in size since the city started managing it. The site is a narrow property between the downtown train tracks and the Chehalis River. It covers 8 acres, according to the assessor's website. Larson said the city would also calculate how much it spent on the property and the value of the property before selling it to someone who's interested. He estimated Wednesday it would be somewhere around $425,000 total, and he was confident the city would have no issues selling it. He also confirmed there's a chance the city could make a profit by selling it. Isn't that just a gross thing to say? What is this guy's... And the city still owns it. They did not sell it for $425,000 or nothing. Alright. So we're going to start talking now about the plans for the permanent location, or as it's referred to sometimes, the long-term encampment, that people at Tassel, the temporary shelter location, are supposed to be moved to eventually. Because Tassel was only ever supposed to be around for 30 days. So we're here at August 16th, 2019. The Aberdeen City Council approves Mayor Eric Larson's plan to acquire property for a long-term site where homeless people could camp, but there was some opposition. The council voted 9-3 Wednesday night to use city funds for a long-term camping facility. Those who voted no were Pete Shave,
Boo.
John Mackey,
Boo.
Council President Tawny Andrews.
Boo.
The council approved spending guidelines for a one-year plan that includes $189,188 in one-time costs to establish the facility and $26,580 in monthly costs. It also supported the mayor's plan to seek grants to pay for some of the costs. So, I'd like to know where that money went, if they had that to spend then, why can't they spend that now? We could do a lot with that, even now, with the property values as they are. The City of Aberdeen has targeted a vacant lot at 421 South Michigan Street. as the preferred location to build a long-term homeless camping facility and could approve the site's purchase at Wednesday's Aberdeen City Council meeting. The lot sits just opposite to the southern end of the riverfront property that has been a long-time homeless encampment before the city cleared it in July. The land purchase agreement on the City Council's agenda says that the city would pay $60,000 for the property as agreed upon by both the city and the landowners. Then on September 9th, the City of Aberdeen will be holding a public hearing on September 25th to consider a one-year temporary use permit to allow for a longer-term homeless camping facility on the property it is acquiring at the foot of South Michigan Street. So that's what they mean by long-term, is 1 year. And they're voting on this 1 year temporary use permit to allow for this facility to exist for presumably 1 year.
Yeah, no, it's long-term in the sense that it's just long enough to let it evaporate from public consciousness.
No, they've switched to longer-term. They're using longer term.
Well, even it's still though, like with Tassel, for example, they win this lawsuit. Everyone goes home and sits down. Like, we won the fight. City's gonna do what they say they're gonna do. Supposedly, they let Tassel extend beyond 30 days, and it lasts for some years and whatnot. And once it's outside of everybody's thought and mind, they tore it all out.
Well, a lot of stuff is about to happen here. We're coming up on November, which is an election, and another winter, and we're also coming up on the pandemic. So a lot's going to happen that's going to change all of these plans very quickly here, as we'll see. October 11th, 2019. The longer term and larger homeless tent encampment proposed for South Michigan Street in Aberdeen is on hold for the time being, following a surprising 10-1 vote at Wednesday's City Council meeting against issuing a temporary use permit for the camp. Karen Rowe was the sole yes vote. Mayor Eric Larson was not at the meeting, out of town for his job. Yet again, that's twice now. Councilwoman Margot Short was absent. Larson put the plan together and oversaw the purchase of the property. The vote will be seen as a defeat for him. The vote followed more than an hour of public comment about the camp, the majority of it against the location. The result was surprising, considering that just 6 weeks ago, the City Council voted 8-3 to allow the city to purchase the property for $60,000 and to use it as a homeless camping facility. At that same meeting, the council approved the purchase of 150 weatherhide shelters to be used at the site at the cost of $45,000. Before the vote, Councilman Pete Shave and Councilwoman Kathy Prieto both said that they didn't think the Michigan Street property, near the corner of South Michigan Street and State Street, and adjacent to the railroad tracks, should be considered for the camp at all. This site is off the table as far as I'm concerned, said Shave. Shave is running to unseat Larson as mayor. Now remember this quote from Shave. This site is off the table as far as I'm concerned. This is in his campaign season. He's actively running against Larson as incumbent. And so he's pushing real hard on the fully I'm not going to give him an inch sort of thing. He has voted pretty much against most of everything so far, and here he's saying this site is off the table. Initially, Councilwoman Deanne Shaw made a motion to table the temporary permit vote to a future meeting to give the council more time to consider other locations. This is after having voted to approve buying this piece of property for $60,000 already.
So, okay, we're going to buy this property for $60,000.
Something happened. They all got cold feet or something. Maybe just that 1 hour of public comment where the haters hated? I don't know.
So fascists complain, and then you're like, that's a good reason to just waste $60,000 of taxpayer money.
Councilman Frank Gordon seconded that motion, but the motion was voted down 6-4. Voting to table were Tim Alstrom, Jeff Cook, Gordon, and Shaw. Voting against were Andrews, Cook, Prieto, Jarek Rogers, Rowe, and Shave. John Mackey abstained from the vote. Back to the original matter, the temporary use permit, Shave said, "Again, I implore the council to vote no on the Michigan Street site, saying the outpouring of public testimony against it made it clear this is not a good site to use." Prieto said the concept is good. She said the location is not good. Councilman James Cook said the businesses in the area that spoke to the council about their concerns with the Michigan Street site, the same businesses who were impacted by the now cleared river camp nearby, have had to put up with this for in excess of a year or more. I think it is time they got a break and we try to find a better solution. Rowe said that she would be voting yes on the site and argued that the council had indeed considered a number of other locations before selecting the Michigan Street site. I don't think any location is perfect, she said, but she said that the city had done its due diligence in the selection, and until there is a perfect solution, she would vote to approve the temporary use permit for the site. And again, this is not for let's put in some permanent homeless encampment. This is, can we put these people here for 1 year? At the August 28th meeting, when the council approved the purchase of 421 South Michigan Street, Larson told the council that the city, in its ad hoc committee on the homeless, looked at about a dozen other properties, none of which were suitable as the Michigan Street site. The 10-1 no vote drew cheers from the crowded gallery, the largest that most in attendance could recall at a recent Aberdeen City Council meeting. The vote was merely to deny the temporary use permit for the site while the council studies other options for a site. It does not necessarily mean the Michigan Street property won't again be considered if no alternative can be found. Earlier in the meeting, the City Council approved extending the existing temporary use permit at the homeless encampment behind City Hall through March 15, 2020. The original report from the Public Safety Committee asked that the permit be extended through November 15th at an additional cost of $5,000 for maintaining the site. In theory, this was to allow for more time to establish the larger camp on Michigan Street before moving the 50-plus current inhabitants of the City Hall site to the new location. So we had 108 people, by their count, which is always low, at the previous location, and we have 50-plus current inhabitants in what they said was a 38-resident camp behind City Hall. So presumably everyone else has dispersed into the surrounding streets at this point. And that's not even being talked about. Now we're just focusing on this much smaller camp we've made behind City Hall. Shaw recommended the extension through winter prior to the Michigan Street permit vote, saying she didn't believe an additional month would be enough time to move the City Hall camp. The amended report was passed, allowing the lengthier extension, with a provision that the cost to the city for the extension be presented to the council at its next meeting, October 23rd. So that was a fiery one. Alright, so now we're going to move to November 5th, and we're going to be talking about the settling of the federal lawsuit, Aitken et al. Versus City of Aberdeen, which is that second lawsuit to deal with where they're going to go after the encampment was cleared. An agreement has been reached in a federal lawsuit prompted by the City of Aberdeen's clearing of the homeless encampment known as the River Camp. The settlement in the case was signed by District Court Judge Ronald Layton Friday. The agreement includes the dismissal of the case along with the following guarantees agreed to by the city. The city will pay $45,000 for complete settlement of the lawsuit, including all claims for damages, costs, and attorney's fees, upon receipt of the signed release and hold harmless agreement signed by each current plaintiff, plus 3 additional potential plaintiffs. The city will provide space in a temporary alternative shelter location, the tent camp behind City Hall, for all unsheltered plaintiffs, those including those currently sheltered there, until March 15, 2020, so long as they abide by the rules of the camp. These sites are being held through Friday, November 8th for the 8 plaintiffs, and then they will be made available for other unsheltered persons in Aberdeen. And this is kind of the downfall of lawsuits, is that this is only covering those 8 plaintiffs. This is not...
There's hundreds of people that this is affected.
Yeah, this is not like a class action lawsuit where you can, as a group of homeless people, sue the city together. Just these 8 people got together and decided to do this. The city will replace the existing tents with weather-hide tents as planned, no later than 10 days following delivery. These shelters are much more weather-resistant than the tents currently used in the temporary camp, and 150 were purchased for the city for use at the proposed South Michigan Street camp. If they're not provided before November 28th, a warming area will be provided due to the cold weather conditions. A warming area has already been established within the City Hall camp. Larson said he has expected the tents to arrive by mid-month. This is already in November. Alright, so December 16th, 2019. Because the City of Aberdeen has what is considered a suitable place for the city's homeless to go, Monday's announcement by the Supreme Court that it would not hear an appeal of the Ninth Circuit Court ruling on the Martin v. Boise case will have little impact on the city's current handling of the homelessness issue. Martin v. Boise arose from a lawsuit involving 7 homeless people who were cited for camping on public property in Boise, Idaho. The appeals court in 2018 said that prosecuting people for sleeping on the sidewalk when there are not enough shelter beds or housing was unconstitutional. Moving into the new year, January 11th, 2020. New Aberdeen Mayor Pete Shave said on Thursday that he favors the property the city bought last year on South Michigan Street for a new homeless camp, after saying this property is off the table for me. As soon as he gets elected, that he says that he favors that property for a new homeless camp. So he was the impetus for that not happening in the first place.
Like, even for the Republicans, the politicians don't serve what you want, the fucked up things that you want. They serve themselves.
It says here, in August, he voted against buying the property at 421 Michigan Street. In that vote, the city council authorized then-Mayor Eric Larson to buy the Michigan Street land as an alternative location to the current homeless camp behind City Hall. In October, when the council voted on whether to permit the homeless camp, he was a vocal opponent and the council rejected the permit, essentially extending the life of the City Hall camp, known as the temporary alternative shelter location, until March 15th. So he is the reason why that lasted until March 15th. And much longer, because of the pandemic. February 1st. Aberdeen City Council met on Wednesday for a workshop to review and discuss the issue of homelessness within the city since the closing of the river camp and the establishment of the temporary camp behind City Hall last July. In order for the city to enforce its laws against camping on the streets, there must be available public space for authorized camping. The temporary camp permit expires in March. The council must decide what to do when it does. Mayor Pete Shave said that at the workshop there was at least 1/3 of the homeless would, quote, move on without camp behind City Hall and the Needle Exchange, which is also near downtown Aberdeen, but not the responsibility of the city, but that he wouldn't try to force the city to close the camp. So let me say that again. Mayor Pete Shave said that at least 1/3 of the homeless would, quote, move on without the camp behind City Hall and the Needle Exchange. Like they're just going to leave the city.
And this is based on what, Pete? But what your evidence is what?
Nope, he just said it.
It's a interesting take.
Yeah. So we're getting close here. March 2nd. It's supposed to close on March 15th, which it could have already been well established over at the Michigan Street site had it not been for Pete Shave. So March 2nd, Grace Harbor County Commissioner Randy Ross said the county won't split the monthly cost of operating the City of Aberdeen's temporary homeless camp behind City Hall, as requested by a letter from the city last month, because funds the county currently receives from the state don't seem to allow that use, but he is open to looking for funding source in the future.
The county doesn't allow use for funding for what?
For operating the City of Aberdeen's temporary homeless camp behind City Hall. Even though the county is the ones who would pay for a homeless shelter.
Which the city has denied multiple times since then.
Alright, so March 9th, 2020. The agenda for this Wednesday's Aberdeen City Council meeting includes 2 reports from the Ad Hoc Committee on Homelessness, on homeless response, that address what action the city should take before the permit for the temporary homeless camp near City Hall expires this coming Sunday. One report recommends that the council approve an extension for the permit through May 15th, pending funding from partner agencies, with an additional $45,000 in expenses. Any extension beyond May 15th would require a separate council authorization. A second report recommends that in the event that the funding becomes available beyond May 15th, that the homeless camp be moved to the city's property located at 421 South Michigan Street. The move would require a temporary use permit to be approved by the council at a later meeting. The temporary permit could only be authorized for up to a year. Does this sound familiar at all? We're doing this all over again. We're repeating 2019 here in 2020. March 14th, 2020. The Aberdeen City Council voted on Wednesday to move the city's temporary homeless camp from its current location to the Michigan Street's property pending outside funding that has been requested from the state. Council voted unanimously to adopt a report from the Ad Hoc Committee to extend the permit for the temporary camp from March 15th to May 15th. The report recommends that should non-city funding not be made available, all camp operations cease and the site would be closed down on May 15th. On a second vote, this won 8-2, the council approved moving the camp to a location at the foot of Michigan Street near the railroad tracks.
The same railroad tracks, again, that they cited were the main issue with them existing at the other camp where they were established.
You could throw a rock and hit one property from the other. It's just right across the tracks. and also the tracks that they're on today. It actually splits camp in half, the train tracks. So this was interesting to me, and I don't know if we're going to find much resolution on this, but they voted 8-2 to move camp to that location, and yet it never happened. Alright, they've extended it yet again. April 10th, 2020. The City Council voted unanimously to close Tassel by May 15th. Meeting via audio conference, council members cited lack of funding support from the state and county as the reason for closing the camp. The vote was 10-0 in favor of the closure, with Ward 2 Councilman John Mackey not participating in the meeting, and with an open Ward 5 position due to the resignation of Jarek Rogers. 10-0 in favor of the closure on April 10th, 2020. Why do you think they would be meeting by audio conference in April of 2020?
Pandemic.
Yeah. So this is like the very early edge. Obviously, enough is known at this point in April that they're taking steps to social distance and meet over Zoom. And yet they vote unanimously 10-0 to close this shelter at the beginning of a global pandemic.
It's beyond irresponsible. It's straight up. It's beyond irresponsible. It's a direct action in the course of population control to try to eradicate the homeless population, which again only serves as a larger health issue and health concern for the rest of the city, spreading COVID further and further out.
Yep. All right. So they voted March 14th to move camp to the Michigan Street track, or to the Michigan Street property. And here on April 20th, just 1 month later, we have the Aberdeen City Council voting on a recommendation to sell the South Michigan Street property that they had bought for this long-term homeless encampment and already voted to move them to. Quote, after more than a year of trying to seek additional funding for a long-term shelter, the city has been unsuccessful in its attempts, reads the report to the council signed by the Community Development Director Lisa Scott. Since funding has not materialized, staff is recommending that the Michigan Street property be declared surplus and put up for sale.
So now they're selling the Michigan Street property.
Yeah, because they couldn't find the funding to keep it going, or to open it. Even though they found the money to buy it, and they had enough money in Eric Larson's proposal to run it for a full year.
So far they bought the initial property, the riverfront property, for how much?
$295,000.
So $295,000 for one property, over $45,000 in lawsuits because of their treatment of the homeless population. How much do they spend on this third property?
$65,000, it says here.
$65,000. So almost $400,000 or $500,000, all spent in the name of trying to eradicate the homeless population.
Yep.
When in making the problems of homelessness exacerbated and affecting everybody even more so by their own actions when these were not issues before.
And think of how many people have died on the streets since then. How many less people would have died if that community had just been given what it needed, as opposed to, destroyed. Alright, April 24th, 2020. After 10 months of operations at a cost of more than $350,000 to the city, Aberdeen will close its tent camp for the homeless located behind City Hall on May 15th. The effect of the closure will be to allow camping on the sidewalks in much of the downtown core. That was prohibited while the city offered the camp as an alternative to the sidewalk. The people in the camp had to agree to certain rules. Those who didn't had to leave, but they still couldn't sleep on the sidewalks because the camp alternative was available to them. Now, not only will the people living at the camp be able to sleep on the sidewalks, but anyone else will as well. 4 days later, on the 28th, closing the homeless tent camp behind City Hall would be a violation of Governor Jay Inslee's proclamation forbidding most evictions during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the State Attorney General's office. As a result, the Aberdeen City Council will vote Wednesday on a recommendation to rescind the city's authorizations to close the camp and extend the temporary use permit and authorize the budget required to maintain camp operations. So there's the money. All they had to do was vote differently, and there's the money pops out of thin air, I guess.
Have we reached the stage that they had actually cleared out the camp behind?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about now. They were supposed to close it May 15th. And we're at April 28th here. After city council members are meeting by Zoom, after this pandemic is well and truly underway, they've already continued on their plans to close it, and it isn't until Governor Jay Inslee's proclamation that they realize that they can't. And the State Attorney General's office writes them a letter and says, you guys can't close this. And so that's all it takes for them to somehow find the money All they had to do was rescind the authorization to close the camp, extend the temporary use permit, and authorize the budget required to maintain the camp operations. And they did that until we got involved, and they tried to close it again after the pandemic, in air quotes, after the pandemic, and we resisted that, and that's when it became kind of an ad hoc and sort of a occupation. And this brings us about to where Chehalis River Mutual Aid Network just started to get going after feeding the local mission and then the local encampments around town. A small group of organizers decided to start a Food Not Bombs and began serving meals and handing out supplies in a park every week. This drew in the local homeless population, and through these meals, connections were formed that are the basis for everything we do today. And now for a musical break with music from Daze off their album Rogue Taxidermy. Here's the song Goodbye Lulu. Hit it!
On the tracks. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. You left home on a freight train. You ain't never going back. Started hanging out at punk shows and you got it in your head to leave home on a freight train, cause that's what the cool kids did. Now you got some shitty sticking folks and hepatitis C. Smell like an unwiped asshole and your socks stick to your feet. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. Stole your packing boots and bins and left you on the tracks. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. You left home on a freight train. You ain't never going back. Woo! For breakfast and you're shooting up at lunch, all coked up in a Walmart screaming, I don't give a fuck! Your dog is fucking starving, but you spend a bill on booze. Your parents bought you Nuggies, you prefer some tattered boots. Goodbye, Lulu, won't be seeing you again. Stole your packing boots and bibs and left you on the tracks. Goodbye, Lulu, won't be seeing you again. You left home on a freight train, you ain't never going back. Woo! Now it's time to buy some food. Fuck that, let's buy some heroin. I guess it's just as good. Fuck a restaurant, there's a dumpster. Let's see what you fly inside. It's like Christmas every day, except the gifts are filled with lies. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. Stole your packing boots and bins and left you on the tracks. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. You left home on a freight train. You ain't never going back. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. Stole your packing boots and bins and left you on the tracks. Goodbye, Lulu. Won't be seeing you again. You left home on a freight train. You ain't never going back. Woo!
Welcome back to Molotov Now. Because of the length of this story, we'll be cutting this episode into 2 parts and releasing part 2 in a few days. When we come back, we will leave behind the daily World's reporting and move into the coverage provided by the Harbor Rat Report, then still operating as Chehalis River Mutual Aid Network. One thing that wasn't happening during this period we've been reading about was asking the homeless what they want or need. Maybe things would have gone a lot easier with some services provided at the river camp as opposed to the traumatic events of the last few years. We've found it incredibly rewarding to simply ask, what do you need, and go from there. What can you do to start addressing the needs of your community? How can you even determine the needs of your community? We need to get out and meet one another. Everyone who is scared of the homeless in this town are peering out from their houses and not going into the streets to actually meet people and get to know them.
Do you know what's going on at your local city council meetings? As radicals, we must watch these spaces as sites of conflict. Even if we don't inhabit these spaces, we should be aware of what goes on there. If only every fascist made their meetings public. The relationship of an anarchist to the city government is obviously a combative one, and we should be wary of any attempts to co-opt our events or spaces by local politicians. Our struggle is in the streets, and not in the meeting halls of power. We cannot forget this while we make sure that we have a working knowledge of what's going on in our city.
The far right in this town are waging class war against the poor in Aberdeen to eradicate them to make way for gentrifiers to move in and start developing. We have ourselves a case study in this in the episode 1 of Molotov Now, where we examined in depth millionaire Terry Emmert and his plans for the town that he now owns most of. They have been on a clearly organized path to bringing about the physical removal of all homeless people from town and moving them to an old juvenile prison facility on the outskirts of town. This plan has been brought up numerous times over the course of the last several years, with some locals calling for the outright labor camps, where people would have to contribute labor in order to stay, but also would not be able to exist anywhere else. This is downright terrifying behavior to witness in real people who live in the same city as you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Molotov Now. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. Our goal with the podcast is to reach out beyond our boundaries and connect the happenings in our small town with the struggles going on in major urban centers. We want to talk to you if you're a big city organizer. We think we have a lot you can learn from, and we know you have much to teach us. If you would like to come on the show, please email us at sabo_media@riseup.net with the header Molotov Now, and we will be in touch about setting up an interview and crafting an episode to feature you.
We want to give a shout out to our friends at the John Brown Gun Club, who showed up to help provide security for our local drag show in the wake of ongoing national terrorism by the far right.
Queer Satanic, who are still embroiled in the lawsuit from the Satanic Temple, are always appreciative of any donations to the legal defense funds. Their website is queersatanic.com.
Don't forget to go to bit.ly/Lakota Law ICWA and sign the petition by the Lakota People's Law Project telling Joe Biden and attorneys for the Department of Justice to do everything in their power to protect the Indian Child Welfare Act and defend Secretary Deb Haaland.
We want to thank the Black Flower Collective for their continued support and wish them luck in their fundraising efforts. To support them or learn more, their website is blackflowercollective.noblogs.org.
It is the heart of winter, and we are still without shelter in Aberdeen. Without intervention, more and more of our homeless population are becoming casualties of the state. Chehalis River Mutual Aid Network is still running a winter fundraiser to buy warm weather gear for the homeless. To donate, visit bit.ly/CRMAN donations.
Collectiva, the anarchist Mastodon server, is growing faster than ever thanks to Elon Musk's stupidity, as many activists close their accounts for bluer skies and can be seen in the fluctuation of followers over on IGD's socials. Join at collectiva.social, KOLEKTIVA, and follow us and other online activists on decentralized federated internet.
Thank you to Daze and the window-smashing job creators for letting us use their songs on the program today.
Don't forget, the Communique is looking for artists and author submissions. Please write to sabo_media@riseup.net to submit your entry before March 6 for our Spring Equinox edition.
Thank you to Pixel Passionate for producing our soundtrack. Please check out their website at www.radicalpraxisclothing.com and check out their portfolio in our show notes. Remember to check out Sabo Media's new website for new episodes, articles, comics, and columns. We have new content all the time. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite corporate data mining platform of choice, and go ahead and make the switch to federated social media on the Collectiva Mastodon server today. At Aberdeen Local 1312 for updates on Sabo Media projects such as the Harbor Rat Report, the Saboteurs, Ask Annie, our podcast Molotov Now, and many other upcoming projects.
That's all for tonight. Please remember to spay and neuter your cats, and don't forget to cast your votes at those who deserve them.
Solidarity, comrades.
This is Molotov Now, signing off.